Prophet Almighty. I hope you had a pleasant home studying experience in the past few weeks of the lockdown. Okay, before we start with our lesson for today, make sure you have a book, pen, and join in from a private room to avoid interruptions from your family members. Our subject for today is Business Studies, Economics 4 and 9. The strand is the producer's decision, with the substrand is the role of producers in the economy. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to define producers in the economy, discuss the role of producers in the economy, define production and factors of production or resources, and identify and describe individuals and groups who participated in the production. We all want or need something every day. So we either buy or produce it ourselves in order to satisfy our needs and wants. So what is producer? Producer is a person that makes or grows goods or provides services for the users. Here are some local examples. Fisherman catches fish for us. A baker bakes or produces bread for pious. Nurses provide services for us when we are sick, and so forth. So these are all examples of producer. The main roles of the producer in an economy is to provide goods and services. They take labor and capital and use them to create goods and services for the needs and wants of people. Sometimes they are called workers and they help us do things. For example, a florist is a producer who makes pretty bouquets. Some florists manage shop and selling flowers. They also make and sell artistic arrangement of flowers and plants, such as bouquets to decorate churches and special occasions such as weddings, prize giving, and so forth. They even produce wreaths for funerals, and they are sometimes called floral designer. A baker is a producer who bakes food such as cakes, breads, donuts, pies, and etc. A painter is a producer who creates artwork for us to admire. A painter is an artist who paints pictures. A painter is someone who paints walls, doors, and some other parts of the buildings as their job. So you look at the two pictures here of this young boy who painted their artwork on the wall, with the other boy that painted the picture of his father. They are both using painting materials so that their final product will be for us to admire. All of the shown pictures of goods and services are made available to the users through production. So what is production? In economics, production is a process in which some materials are transformed from one form to another. For example, making of timber out of trees, producing or making beefsteak from cow, and so forth. There are factors or resources that determines productions that must have in order to produce goods and services. So the first factor of production is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. There is no production, or the production cannot be completed without any of the four factors as mentioned earlier. So before we come to a discussion of the four factors of production, let's define the words here, which are goods and services. A good is a tangible or physical product that someone will buy, such as pen, book, chair, pot, and so forth, or something that you can touch. A service is something intangible, which can't be physically touched and stored, or activities provided by others such as teaching, nursing, housekeeping, and etc. The purpose of production is to produce goods and services in order to satisfy our needs and wants. There is no product can be made without the four factors of production, or also known as resources. Or in other words, without one factor, the production will be delayed or even nothing to produce, or the inputs indeed for producing goods and services. The first factor is land. We may discuss what and why land is considered as one of a factor that needs to have for production. So, land has a broad definition as a factor of production. Land as a production factor also includes other natural resources such as water, forest, and minerals found in the earth crust. This includes any natural resource used to produce goods and services. So this includes not just land, but anything that comes from the land. Some common land or natural resources are water, oil, goba, natural gas, coal, and forest. So land resources are the raw materials in the production process. Labor is the second one. Labor is the effort that people contributed to the production of goods and services. Labor resources include the work done by workers such as the waiter who brings your food at a local restaurant, as well as the engineer who designed the bus that transports you to school or to work. It includes an artist's creation of a painting, as well as the work of the pilot flying the airplane. Capital. The third factor of production is capital. We all think of capital as the machinery, tools and buildings humans use to produce goods and services. So capital differs based on the worker and the type of work being done. And the last one is entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur is a person who combines the other factors of production like land, labor, and capital to earn a profit. So the most successful entrepreneurs are innovators who find new ways to produce goods and services, or who develop new goods and services to bring to market. Without the entrepreneur combining land, labor, and capital in new ways, many of the innovations we see around us will not exist. I want you to watch this little video on production. This video has been extracted from the Khan Academy.
An idea that will keep coming up as you study economics is the idea of the four factors of production, which are usually listed as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And the idea here is if you want to produce anything, so let's just say this circle is the production process, and this arrow is the output, you need inputs. Now, you might have many inputs. You might need supplies, you might need a factory, you might need people to work in the factory. You need all of these different things. But the idea of the four factors of production is that these things can all be classified in one of these four groups as either land, labor, capital, or entrepreneurship. Now, these words have meaning in everyday language, and so some of it might jump out at you. Of course, if you need to build a factory or if you need a farm, you need land to do so. And you can see that in this example here where we see a farm. Clearly, they need a lot of land in order to have the farm. Even in a garment factory, this is a picture of a garment factory from maybe 100 years ago. Even there, they needed land on which to build the factory. So this floor is sitting on land. And land doesn't just have to strictly mean land in an economics context. It can mean natural resources in general. This could be things like water or air or energy. So in some contexts, instead of land, some people might say natural resources for this first factor of production. Now, another important factor of production, and arguably they are all important, is the idea of labor. To produce many or most things, someone has to work on it. So someone had to plant these seeds, and they will have to harvest these crops. The labor is very clear here. You see people putting in work in order to produce the product right over there. Now, capital is an interesting one. It means one thing in everyday language, and it means something slightly more specific when we talk about it in an economics context. In an economic context, capital is something produced to produce other things. So examples of capital would be tools that you use to produce other things. It could be a building that you need in order to produce other things. It could be the machinery in a factory. So in these two pictures, there's many examples of capital. You could view this table and the tools that these folks are using. That is capital. You could view the whole building itself and all of the light fixtures and all of that as capital. So all of this stuff is capital. The hangers that they're putting the coats on after they produce it, that is capital. In this farm example, the capital would be the buildings. These were constructed so that they could produce the food from the farm. This it looks like some type of machinery there. That is capital for the farm. It's being used to produce the output of the farm. Now, the place that's different than everyday language. In everyday language, when people talk about capital, they'll often include financial capital, financial assets that could be used to get benefit in the future, things like money. But in an economic context, we are not considering financial assets. We're only thinking about things that were produced in order to produce other things. The fourth factor of production is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship in our everyday language means putting things together so you're trying to create other things. When someone's an entrepreneur, you might imagine someone who's trying to start a business. In an economic context, it has a related idea. Entrepreneurship is putting together all of the other factors of production so that you can actually produce things. You can't just randomly build buildings and randomly plant seeds. Someone has to think about how do you put these things together so that you can produce things in a reasonable way. And obviously you want to produce as much as possible given the other factors that you are putting into the production. A related idea, and it sometimes is used interchangeably in an economics course, is technology. So sometimes you'll see the four factors of production as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and sometimes you'll see it listed as land, labor, capital, and technology. But when you see technology as a factor of production, don't think about it as technology in everyday language, where you think of computer chips or software. When people are talking about technology as a factor of production, they are really talking about entrepreneurship. They're talking about the know-how of putting together the other factors of production in order to produce that output. Finally, I want to leave on one idea. The idea of the two types of things that could be produced from all of these factors of production. Broadly speaking, we could produce something that could be used to produce more things. And we already talked about it. We could be, in that situation, be producing capital goods. So that could be that we are constructing a factory that itself maybe produces tools for other people to use in some other production process. The other option we have is to produce what are known as consumption goods. Consumption goods. Consumption goods are goods that are just used. It might make people happy, they might find pleasure in it, but it's not being used to produce other things. And because our production resources are scarce, there's a trade-off when a society or a factory or whoever decides how much capital to produce versus how much consumption goods. You need some consumption goods, otherwise, frankly, we wouldn't have clothing on, we wouldn't be eating nice meals, we wouldn't be able to enjoy our lives. But at the same time, you also need capital. If we did only consumption goods, at some point, we wouldn't have all the things we need to produce the consumption goods. So it's a very interesting trade-off that we'll explore more in future videos.
Hope you enjoyed listening and watching this video on the four factors of production or resources and how these four factors combined in order to produce a finished product or services. So I am the owner of my business, and my business is making banana chips because I try it and it's more profitable than other products I know. So the question is, how do I get things for my business instead of buying from the market or get from other people? I must have a banana plantation of my own. Looking at the diagram here of the four factors of production, These are the factors that I should have in order to cater for my need. Firstly, the land. I should have a land for growing bananas. Without land, I can't get what I want. I can't grow bananas on my house. So, I must have a land for my plantation. Secondly, there must be someone or people to work in the plantation, making sure the bananas grows well with the right time for harvesting. Thirdly, I should have some tools or even a machine for slicing, frying and baking the bananas and do all the work. And very last to me as an owner or an entrepreneur to my business, I have to make sure my final produce is all in good condition and ready to sell. Also, I have to make a final decision if my product is not in good quality for the market. So we will then look at how these four factors of production will combine in order to produce a local product. And that is the end of our lesson for today on some of the learning outcome of this strand. And for now, so far so far.